The story of my childhood. The next May, the summer school opened, taught by Miss Suzanne Torre. Again, I write the name reverently, and she was one of the most perfect of personality. I walked a mile to school with my one precious little schoolmate, Nancy Fitz. Nancy Fitz, the playmate of my childhood, the charm of laughing girlhood, the faithful, trusted companion of young womanhood, and the beloved life friend that the relentless grasp of life has neither changed nor taken from me. On entering the wide open door of the inviting schoolhouse, armed with some most unsuitable reader, a spelling book, geography, atlas, and slate, I was seized with a deep fear of finding myself with no member of the family near, and my trepidation became so visible that the gentle teacher, revealing me of my burden of books, took me tenderly on her lap and did her best to reassure and calm me. At length I was given my seat, with a desk in front of my atlas and slate, my toes at least a foot from the floor, and that became my daily happy home for the next 3 months. Of the succeeding years, 6, 7, and 8, I recall little of note beyond my study, expecting an inclination I had for writing verses, many of which were preserved to amuse, others to tease me for many years. During long vacation, there was garden and flower bed to be made, pet animal to look after, a few needy families with little children to be thought of, and some sewing to be attempted. I recall no season of toils and belief. They were never included in my curriculum. During the preceding winter, I began to hear talk of my going away to school, and it was decided that I be sent to Colonel Stone's high school to board in his family and to go home occasionally. This arrangement, I learned in later year, had a double object. I was that is known as a bashful child, timid in the presence of other people, a condition of things found impossible to correct at home. In the hope of overcoming this undesirable trait, it was decided to throw me among strangers. How well I remember, my father took me in his carriage with a little dressing case, something I had never owned. It was April, cold and bare. The house and school rooms adjoined and seemed enormously large. The household was also large. The long family table with my loved and feared teacher as its head seemed to be something formidable. There were probably 150 pupils daily in the ample schoolroom, of which I was perhaps the youngest, except the colonel's own children. My studies were chosen with great care. I remember among them ancient history with chart. The lessons were learned to repeat by rote. I found difficulty both in learning the proper name and in pronouncing them, as I had not quite outgrown my list. One day I had studied very hard on the ancient kings of Egypt and thought I had everything perfect, and when the people above me failed to give the name of a reigning king, I answered very promptly that it was Ptolemy. The colonel checked with a glance the rising laugh of the older member of the class and told me very gently that P was silent in that word. I had, however, seen it all and was so overcome by mortification for my mistake and gratitude for the kindness of my teacher that I burst into tears and was permitted to leave the room. My study gave me no trouble, but I grew very tired, felt hungry all the time, but dared not eat, grew thin and pale. The colonel noticed it and watching me at table found that I was eating little or nothing, refusing everything that was offered to me. Mistrusting that it was fun from timidity, he had food laid on my plate, but I dared not eat it, and finally at the end of the term, a consultation was held between the colonel, my father, and our beloved family physician, Dr. Delano Pierce, who lived within a few doors of the school, and it was decided to take me home until a little longer and wiser I could hope. My timid sensitiveness must have given great annoyance to my friend. If I ever could have gotten entirely over it, it would have given far less annoyance and trouble to myself all through life. To this day, I would rather stand behind the lines of artillery or cross a bridge under fire than to be expected to preside at public meeting. A favorite nephew of my father, Mr. Jeremiah Larned, had died after a lingering illness, leaving a widow and 4 children from 13 to 6 years of age on the fine farm which had descended to him from his father. Unfortunately, due to his long illness, the farm had to be sold. This would result in depriving the widow and her small children of a home, and in order to prevent this, it was decided that my father and a brother-in-law of Mrs. Larned, Captain Sylvester McIntyre, who had no children, would purchase the farm and keep the widow and children with them. The hill farm for there were two were sold to my brother. Thus, I became the occupant of two homes. The removal of the second home was great novelty to me. I became observant of all changes made. One of the first things found necessary on entering a house of such ancient date was rather extensive renovation of painting and papering. The leading artisan in the line in the town was Mr. Salvanus Harris, a courteous man of fine manner, a good scholar, and who, for nearly half a lifetime, was the town clerk. Mr. Harris has engaged to make necessary improvement. Painting did not include any prepared material like in the later days. The painter brought his massive white marble slab, ground his own paint, mixed his color, boiled his oil, calcined his plaster, his putty, and did scores of things that a painter of today would not only never think of doing, but would often scarcely know how to do them. Coming from the newly built house where I was born, I had seen nothing of this kind done and was intensely interested. I must have persisted in making myself a nuisance, for I was constantly reminded not to get in the gentleman's way, but I was not to be set aside. My combined interest and curiosity for one overcome by timidity and encouraged by the mild, genial face of Mr. Harris. I gathered the courage to walk up in front and address him. Will you teach me to paint, sir? With pleasure, little lady. If mamma is willing, I should very much like your assistance. And so I wore a dress suited to my new work and reported for duty. I was faithfully and intelligently instructed in my first month's apprenticeship. I was taught how to hold my brushes, to take care of them, allowed to help trim my paint, shown how to mix and blend them, how to make putty and use it, to prepare oil and drying, and learned from experience that boiling oil was a great deal hotter than boiling water, was taught to trim paper neatly, to match and help to hang it, to make the most approved paste, and even varnish the kitchen chairs to the entire satisfaction of my mother, which was triumph enough for one little.